Hey guys, it's Vince and Drew with Power 5 Fanatics, and we're heading into week 12, and we were thinking back to week 11, and we got a few takeaways as far as that week and some of the things that have happened as far as the playoff selection committee this week, because I know there's a little bit of shakeup there with Alabama losing. Speaking of the committee, I've noticed that they value wins on certain teams more, and they discount the losses that those teams might have had as far as where they're going to rank teams. My example is Georgia. Georgia got vaulted into the 4 spot.
Yep.
Okay. On our 4 spot, Power 5 Fanatics, we got Oregon there, which a lot of people wouldn't. And my point is, of course, Georgia, they had their big loss against South Carolina, and which was a huge glaring loss in my opinion at home. In fact, I just think you can't do that, okay? But they've also had 2 big wins. They had Notre Dame and they had Florida, and they won convincingly. And what I'm getting at is the committees are valuing the wins they had, those big wins, especially one of them being a non-conference foe, and then maybe discounting the South Carolina loss more than we do. I think the South Carolina loss, it hurts the resume much more than maybe even the win against Notre Dame and Florida. That's the reason we don't have them before the committee does. So that seems to be the way they're thinking, and not everybody agrees with that, but that's the way we look at it. We think the losses are a big deal. And, as far as like some teams like Clemson, they barely beat North Carolina early in the year about 5 or 6 weeks ago. The way I look at it, you get one of those where you barely win at home against an inferior opponent, but you can't keep having them like Baylor's had. So I agree with the committee on that. They have Baylor, I think, at 12
or 12.
Yeah, I think we got them at 15. They got them at 13. So they do agree with us on that. If you keep having these wins where you're winning on the last second field goal, or it goes into triple overtime against TCU, there has to be something there that maybe they're not this Baylor's not as much as we're thinking some other people might think they are. But that's kind of my takeaway there, just the way the committee seems to be thinking at this point.
I think the next takeaway that I learned from the way the committee ranked the teams, I really think what's hurting Baylor, obviously they're barely winning games, and they haven't. But the other thing is they haven't really played anybody that's super competitive, and their non-conference
was not good.
Not very good. I mean, they really didn't play anyone until they got into conference play.
About 5 games into it.
Yeah. So what I've noticed, at least in the off season, and really kind of even during the season, if you're just paying attention to what some of these teams are scheduling down the road, you got obviously LSU and Texas played this year. You had Oregon and Auburn play this year. You had Georgia and Notre Dame have a home and home, and then in the future you've got like Ohio State's playing Georgia down the road. They're playing Texas. These ADs are starting to schedule these big non-conference games because that's important to the committee. I mean, they've shown it time and time again that if you can win those big games early on, it vaults you early in the season where you can continue to climb. I think there's some examples of some teams that have kind of struggled, as far as because they haven't played anyone. And, we have Ohio State, on our first spot, but they actually just dropped down to number 2, and then Clemson has
and it's probably because they haven't played anybody, even though they have been just killing everybody.
They've been destroying people. We think that they're the best team in the country.
Definitely.
And then Clemson's kind of had to claw their way into it.
Yeah.
They're the returning national champions from last year, and they have all the clout in the world. But they've had to come back a little bit because they didn't play anyone. They struggled against North Carolina when. But now they're starting to get some respect. And then you have teams like Baylor, who are number 13, and they're undefeated, but they haven't really played anyone either. And then Minnesota's kind of in that same
And there's
boat.
a few other ones. Oklahoma, non-conference, not good. I mean, they played UCLA. At the time, UCLA was one of the worst teams in the Power 5 conferences. They've improved since then, so it doesn't look as bad. And they did win. It was on the road, but that was probably the toughest non-conference game they had.
Yeah, and to kind of expand on the Oklahoma point, I mean, they would be in the same boat as Georgia if they had, more
Exactly.
good wins.
If they would have beat Notre Dame,
Because
they'd be in the same boat.
To me, the loss to Kansas State is very comparable to the loss to South Carolina for Georgia.
I agree.
Except for Georgia has had an opportunity to kind of redeem themselves. Oklahoma and
Actually, I think Kansas State's better than South Carolina.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. They don't have
They haven't played anyone in the non-conference, so it's pretty.
They don't have
clear.
that Notre Dame win.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear that the committee values those big wins.
They do, and probably more so than ever. Name recognition is not going to get you there. And of course, I know they use a lot of metrics to figure this out, but a lot of it is just the eye test. And and they sit down, and they discuss these things, and it seemed like the name recognition maybe is not going to be working the same way as it used to, and you got to put it together. And any non-conference big wins is going to help you out in a big way.
Yes.
Speaking of non-conference, I'm going to talk about Alabama in particular. Of course, they got knocked down to 5 on the playoff rankings, which honestly surprised me. I thought they'd get in at 4. We also got them at 5. And a couple things. Number one, traditionally they don't play a tough non-conference schedule, and my deal less about where they end up in the playoff rankings and more just how prepared the team is when you're playing cupcakes every week, and you don't even have to, you can pull starters in the third quarter and that sort of thing. Once you finally run up against a competent foe and it's a dogfight, okay, i.e. LSU, Clemson in the title game last year, and you get punched in the face once or twice, a lot of those young players they have, whether they're freshmen or sophomore, they haven't been in those fights. And I use the analogy of The Christmas Story, one of our favorite movies.
Yeah.
I'm sure all
Especially
of our viewers.
around this time of year.
Okay, what happened in the junkyard when the bully goes up to Ralphie, and Ralphie finally had enough and he punched the bully in the face? Well, the bully didn't know how to react.
Yeah.
And I hate using the bully for Alabama, for all you Alabama fans, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. They get punched in the face and they don't know how to respond, other than they really don't know how to fight back, is what I'm trying to say. So I think that's hurt them on the non-conference. If they're playing Notre Dame or they're playing anybody, UT or Texas or anybody like that, they can help build up their ability, to get through the
resilience.
grind. Yeah, the resilience to when they finally start playing the big games. Anyway, that's my takeaway with Alabama, because you look at their last 2 big games, that's kind of how they responded. LSU, Clemson in the title game. And no one can tell me that they don't have as much or more talent than both of those teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true, very true. And the final takeaway that we came up with this week is, let's not get complacent where we're at, as far as the scenarios that can get, these teams into the playoffs. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to happen these next few weeks
that we're not
expecting, we're not planning for.
Yeah.
We already have an opportunity this weekend where you have, a team like Minnesota's playing Iowa on the road. Could be something there.
Yeah, no, it's real easy to think about it. Hey, if Minnesota gets to the title game, or if Oregon wins out, and it's real easy to kind of get all this in your head thinking it's going to happen. But
yeah,
I think what Drew's saying is,
well, and then also you got the elephant in the room is Georgia having to go on the road to Auburn. That's a rivalry game. Yeah. They've shown time and time again that they can win these tough games. In 2017, they had to beat the number 1 team 2 weeks consecutively, where they beat Georgia. They were number 1, beat them.
And then Alabama.
And then Alabama the next week, number 1, and they beat them. And then they ended up going to the conference championship game. So we've seen some crazy things happen, and you also have Oklahoma and Baylor playing.
There's probably going to be some chaos, I think is what Drew's saying.
Yeah,
here
there's going to be some chaos
in the next 3 weeks that we're not expecting. Probably will be. So, well, hey, guys, that's our takeaways. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, because we're going to have some more videos. Appreciate you watching. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.